Good afternoon. Um, it gives me immense pleasure to welcome everyone to this talk on comparative linguistics and the origins of the Dravidian idea 1816 to 1856. And I extend a very warm welcome to Dr. Iliyas Husain, who is a fellow with NMML currently. He is teaching at the Department of History and Culture at Jamia Millia Islamia. He has also taught at Motilal Nehru College, University of Delhi. In his PhD thesis, he explored the debates on the national language in the 20th century. He published half a dozen papers on the thesis of his study. This is, of course, different from his doctoral work. The topic of his lecture, Comparative Linguistics and the Origins of the Dravidian Idea, is extremely important, and of course there is a good amount of debate on this topic. The British in the process of conquering India bit by bit over a period of 100 years, and then in the process of creating a viable system of ruling and governing India as a foreign power, created what can only be described as a masterly system of not only putting sorry very sorry not only putting military, police, etc. in place to enable them to rule the country, but also focused on the production of knowledge about all aspects of Indian society and history. And that production of knowledge, though it cannot be said that it was all necessarily directly and deliberately geared towards producing only a certain kind of knowledge, but the reality is that there was a deep connection between the knowledge produced by the British rulers and the people associated with them in various ways, and the requirements of ruling in a vast foreign land like India. So they seized upon some of the existing fault lines in Indian society and widened them, and they also, in the process of creating knowledge, created some new fault lines. Many of them are still with us. We know that in most societies, religion, race, language, region provide grounds of differences between people. In Indian society, of course, the British could also seize upon what is now called caste. Though we know very well that even this last idea of caste, as we know it today, is partly a creation of the British rule in India, which is what has been argued by people like Bernard Cohn, Nicholas Dirks. But these 4 or 5 markers of identity, the fault lines, were the axes along which much of the knowledge produced by the British about Indian society moved, and the focus of Dr. Iliyas Husain's talk today is of course on the language issue. Now, as far as language issue is concerned, in a vast continent like India, which had and continues to have so many languages, next to caste probably it provided, or maybe even more than caste, it provided a very potent ground for creating that kind of imperialistic knowledge. And that is precisely what happened starting from the late 18th century to the first half of the 19th century, and then later also. How Indian languages were studied by the British. First, the Orientalists, whose motives were somewhat different, they founded the discipline of what is called comparative philology. And then, of course, in the first half of the 19th century, it moved on to what can fittingly be described as comparative linguistics, the focus being more on grammar in the later rather than the origin of languages, etc. We know, of course, about the theory of Indo-European group of languages, which came into existence in the late 18th century, mainly because of the work of pioneering Orientalist William Jones. But in the first half of the 19th century, when we see more micro-level study of linguistics in India, which was also related to ethnology and anthropology, wherein Indian languages and consequently Indian people were also sought to be put in different categories on the basis of broad divisions of languages. And that is where I believe Dr. Iliyas Husain is going to argue the idea of one coherent Dravidian group of languages, and also Dravidian people therefore originated. So how it transformed the original meaning of the word Dravidian, which was used in Sanskrit language for thousands of years, only in the sense of a region, without having any connection either with race or with ethnicity or with language as such. How that was transformed, I think that is going to be the story of Dr. Iliyas Husain's lecture today. So I once again extend a very warm welcome to everyone present and request Dr. Iliyas Husain to proceed with his lecture.
Thank you, the chair, our DD, Ravi Mishra ji, and my colleagues here, the fellows and senior fellows, Professor Meenakshi Jain, Professor Peggy Mohan, and others luminaries who came here for the talk. This talk actually is a part of my work here as a fellow, which is on the evolution of linguistic cartography. Linguistic cartography emerged with the evolution of two disciplines in 19th century with the emergence of linguistics and cartography. So the work is on that. In process of that, this talk is actually part of that work, and but primarily set on the origin of linguistic idea. So how comparative linguistics given basis for the evolution of the Dravidian idea would be the focus of this talk. So the first point I would like to make, that philology, which was emerging in 18th century and later developed in linguistics, as Ravikant Mishra has pointed out, it has its association since its origin. It has its association with ethnology, and this we found continuously in most of the text. For example, the text which I am going to discuss today, the work of Robert Caldwell, a comparative grammar of Dravidian or South Indian family of language. In the introduction, when this work was published, when the third edition of this work was published, so the son-in-law of Robert Caldwell, J.L. White, and T. Ramakrishna Pillai, uh, while telling the importance of this work, noted that Bishop Caldwell's comparative grammar of the Dravidian or South Indian family of languages is so well known a classic of Indian philology as to need no introduction to researchers who are interested in the ethnology or linguistics of India. So ethnology was part of linguistic studies since its origin, and it continued. The origin of philology or comparative religion comparative linguistics can be seen from the Leibniz, who died in 1716. It was noted by Benjamin W. Dwight in his book Modern Philology that he was zealous to explore the ethnography of human being. So we know that Leibniz has created a list of words, a list of vocabulary. He wanted to trace, he wanted to compare them to trace analogies between the languages, especially in the European languages. So but his ultimate goal was to explore the genealogy of mankind. So what is the point? That since the origin, comparative linguistics was associated with the search of ethnology of human being. What was the new in Leibniz vocabulary list? He actually, the list contained the name of family relatives, parts of body, daily necessities, foods and other things, names of natural objects which we saw in our world, moon, sun, sky, and names of numbers. So in comparing words, Leibniz focused on primitive and native words. This was the new thing which Leibniz introduced, that he focused to compare the primitive and native words. So his method was further developed by other philologists. And this comparison of vocabulary continued. This method was also used by William Jones, actually. There are a lot of scholars whose work paid in the emergence of comparative linguistics, but we come directly to the William Jones because his ideas his ideas were responsible for the origin of comparative linguistics. So in the evolution of comparative linguistics, William Jones is well known. After the foundation of Asiatic Society in 1784, he used to offer a research paper every year, which are known as anniversary discourse. It was the third discourse which was named on Hindus, in which Jones proposed similarities between Sanskrit and Latin as well as Greek. His other discourses were centered on Arabs, Tatars, Persians, and Chinese. So this project of William Jones was also ethnological in its nature, rather linguistic. It was project of ethnology which ultimately resulted in the origin of comparative linguistics. So this is the quote, well-known quote, which William Jones has given in his third discourse, and we all know it. This is highly cited, but I would attract your attention on the last point. On the last point, when he said the Sanskrit language, whatever be its antiquity, is a wonderful structure, more perfect than the Greek and more copious than the Latin. Then he moved to the point that both in the roots of verb and in the form of grammar, then could possibly have produced by incident, so strong indeed then no philologer could examine them all, all three without believing them to have sprung from common source. But in the last sentence, what he wrote, that all these had the same origin with the Sanskrit, and the old Persian might be added to same family. When I was reading this, I stopped here, that why he has written Persian in the last. Why he has written Persian in the last. However, we know that John was very well versed in Persian language. He even wrote a grammar of Persian language in 1771 before his arrival in India, and his work was well acknowledged. Uh, he he was made the fellow of Royal Society of Britain the next year because of this work, and his biographer, the well-known biographer Garland Cannon, pointed out that he was often called Persian John because of this work. William Jones' correspondence, which are actually collected by Sir John Shore, shows that Jones was in continuous dialogue with other scholars of Persian in Europe, which shows that he has sufficient knowledge of Persian. So we may conclude that similarities between Sanskrit and Persian, because these were the most closest language in the Indo-Aryan family, initiated the idea in the minds of Jones. But even then, in the previous slide, you may find that John, John actually put Persian in the last. Why he did that? Perhaps because of the presence of anti-Persian sentiments among the early Orientalists. Because the 18th century cultural was dominated by Persianate culture. So perhaps because of that, because this anti-Persian sentiment is seen not only in William Jones, in others also. For example, in Ellis also, who played very important role in providing Dravidian proof. So perhaps because of that, here the colonialism is seen working in this project, in this linguistic project. So this is the next point, that whether the linguistic projects of William Jones or others are simply associated with the language studies as believed, or they were simply ethnological studies at some time argued. Actually, these have some other aspects also as far as the case of India. So colonialism and Orientalism were very much associated with these projects. I have some quotes from the grammar of the Persian language, which was written by William Jones. He wrote in the preface, at the first page, it was found highly dangerous to imply the natives as interpreters, upon whose fidelity they, means the servant of empire, could not depend. And it was at last discovered that they must apply themselves to the study of Persian language, in which all the letters from the Indian princes were written. So the aim was very clear. The aim to learn Persian was very clear in the preface of the grammar. Further he wrote, the languages of Asia will now perhaps be studied with common ardor. The manner and the sentiment of Eastern nations will be perfectly known, and the limit of our knowledge will be no less extended than the bounds of our empire. This is the case, as perhaps Eaton is saying, that when all evidence will be in our hand, we will be able to write all the histories. So the truth will be revealed. So now William Jones was saying that we will learn the language, and all command will be in our hand. This, in this way, the idea was that one day the colonizer or the imperialist may tell the subject that what is your language, what is the literature, and what are the structure. So the structures are told by the colonialist. Garland Cannon noticed that Jones was baffled by the varying opinion of Brahmins in doing his duty as a judge. Hence, he decided to learn Sanskrit. Control over the language was a necessary part of the control over the subject. So, what was the reason for study Persian for Jones was the reason for the study of Sanskrit for Jones also. So, colonialism is very much part of that. So, the conclusion of this part actually. An enthusiasm of linguistic study may have originated in the search of ethnology of humans. In India, linguistic studies evolved for the needs of empire. This is a point on which British Orientalism in India differed from the German Orientalism in Europe, which focused on the study of ethnology actually, because Germany was not colonized India. Britain was colonized. So the German studies of German linguistic studies differ in this way from the English studies of linguistics in India. The comparative linguistics had different trajectories in Asia and Europe. In Europe, especially in Germany, it has become a tool to trace ancestry, the origin of nations, and finally the identity of race. In India, comparative linguistics was applied to discover various families, to understand and cultivate deeper knowledge of people, their culture, and religion. As India was a linguistically diverse country, it provided material for the study of various language families. This was actually the case. Since the origin of Indo-European idea, the German linguists were, were asking for books from India. And Sanskrit became the new linguistic tool for the study of comparative linguistics in Europe. So in all comparative linguistic studies, however, a genealogical model was applied to trace the family, as in the genetics. So this became the modern science. However, languages evolved differently. They did not evolve always through genealogies. They may have many currents. There might be many currents which come to form a new language. So those were actually denied. The study of those were actually denied. So now from this point we come to the next part of this talk, the origin of the Dravidian idea. The evolution of comparative linguistics has enabled a scholar to compare the grammar of various languages instead of comparing vocabulary, was Leibniz was doing. Now people started comparing grammars. There are a lot of scholars in Europe, in Germany, but the main role was played by Franz Bopp, a German linguist and Sanskritist, who wrote the first Indo-European languages, a comparative grammar of Indo-European languages, and it was published in 1833. Then the English version was published in 1845 to 53. Between the 1845 to 53, it was in 3 volumes. However, he compared cognates of various languages, which was published in a paper in 1816. So the time of these studies, if we later we will find that when Franz Bopp was writing in comparative grammar of Indo-European languages, at the same time Robert Caldwell was working on Dravidian project. So the time, the simultaneity is actually very important. So in the origin of Dravidian idea, in my opinion, the most important role played by the Robert Caldwell's study, which is written here at the second point, a comparative grammar of Dravidian or South Indian family of languages. So he played, in my view, the most important role. Similarly, after some time in 1872, the first comparative grammar of modern Aryan languages was also published by John Beams. However, Beams has published another work in 1868, Outlines of Indian Philology, and because however, he has not read Robert Caldwell's work, but he aware of his work, he created a map. He created a map, which is here, in which he traced a Dravidian geography, which was actually based on Robert Caldwell's work, but at this time he did not discuss the name of Robert Caldwell, but created a map in which Dravidian geography is shown differently and Indo-Aryan is shown in a separate part. What is the importance of this map? Actually, this map visualized a Dravidian idea. So we shall notice that the Dravidian geography was depicted with blue color here. However, we do not get any reason for the selection of color in the text. In Beam's text, there is no explanation why he selected these particular colors for Indo-European language or Dravidian language. We shall also recognize that some North Indian regions are also shown with the blue color, particularly a part of Balochistan. I will come to this point again when we start discussing Robert Caldwell's work. The Tamil and Telugu region were divided by a linear blue line. It shows the uncertainty of the border of these languages. Beams was not an expert in the Dravidian languages. What he did actually, he perhaps copied this line from a previous map produced by the Serampur missionary. This map visualized the Dravidian geography, which was already present in Caldwell's work. John Beam, however, visualized the Dravidian geography, but Robert Caldwell was the scholar who established the Dravidian idea. Now we come to the main work who created the Dravidian idea, Robert Caldwell's work, the origin of Dravidian word. Robert Caldwell actually introduced Dravidian as generic term. He was the first who used Dravidian as a generic term. Before that, this term was there, Dravina, Dramida. There was variety of terms, sometimes used for people, sometimes for culture, sometimes for area, and sometimes might be for languages also. But sometimes the term Dravina was used for Tamil also. So this was not a generic term. But what Robert Caldwell did, he actually defined Dravidian, Dravina with IAN, Ian, English. So he introduced actually this term. He explained why he preferred to use Dravidian as a generic word. He explained it that it was used since time immemorial. It was used by Sanskrit philologists. So however, he accepted that sometimes this term Dravina is used for Tamil also. Then Robert Caldwell was the person who first identified a Dravidian geography, which was actually depicted in John Beam's map also. So he actually identified a Dravidian geography. What would be the Dravidian area? So the idioms which are included in this word under the general term Dravidian constitute the vernacular speech of the great majority of inhabitants of South India, with the exception of Orissa and those districts of Western India and Deccan in which Gujarati and Marathi are spoken. The whole of peninsular portion of India from the Vindhya mountains and the river Narbunda to Cape Comorin is peopled, and from the earliest period appear to have been peopled by different branches of one and the same race, speaking different dialect of one and the same language, the language to which the term Dravidian is here applied. So he identified the Dravidian geography. Here emphasis is given to a part in which he used the term race. We will come to that. So the idea of a separate Dravidian race was also actually introduced by Caldwell. Caldwell, like other linguistic scholars, what linguistic scholars were doing in Europe, has produced the idea of a separate Dravidian race. He wrote that the indigenous Dravidian languages which have maintained their ground for more than 2000 years against Sanskrit. A contradictory view is seen here. Against Sanskrit, the languages of numerous, powerful, and venerated sacerdotal race may be expected successfully to resist the encroachment of every other tongue. So he has not only saw Sanskrit and Dravidian as a contradictory and conflicting language, but argued that the language is protected from the encroachment of Sanskrit, which was not the case till 18th century. Languages influence each other. Dravidian may have influenced Sanskrit, Sanskrit influenced Dravidian languages, but a conflicting idea of languages is produced with the idea of race also. But the most important aspect of Robert Caldwell's study was the discovery of Brahui. Robert Caldwell identified Brahui as a Dravidian language. This identification has generated theories of Dravidian migration from north to south. Uh, the primary idea is actually produced by Robert Caldwell. The Brahui enables us to trace the Dravidian race beyond the Indus to the southern confines of Central Asia. The Brahui language, considered as a whole, seemed to be derived from the same source as the Punjabi and Sindhi, but it evidently contained a Dravidian element. And discovery of this Dravidian element in a language spoken beyond the Indus tend to show that Dravidian, like the Aryans, the Greco-Scythian, and the Turco-Mongolian, must have entered India by the northwestern route. So with the discovery of Brahui, migration theory has been created by Robert Caldwell. So, conclusion part 2. So we can observe simultaneity and similarity in the projects of comparative linguistics, either in India and Europe. At the same time, when German linguistics in Germany were studying Indo-European linguistic family, at the same time in South India, Robert Caldwell and others also, Iliyas also, who was also involved. We will discuss that. So at the same time, these peoples were using the same methodology of comparative linguistics and pointed out some linguistic family in India. Primary search of ethnology transformed to the search for the presence of various races. In the earlier phase, however, the linguistic studies associated with the search of ethnology. Now they culminated in the search of race in Indo-European as well as in Dravidian also. The search for ancestry along with migration gave way to the new research in archaeology and genetics nowadays. The genetics in nowadays looking for the genealogies, ethnologies, and migrations, and trying to prove whether Indo-Aryan idea is correct or not correct. So genealogists are doing that nowadays. More than that, comparative linguistics has created new identities, which are linguistics, regional, and also national in some way. In Europe, most of these studies focused on national identity. In India also, in the latter period, not in this time, the term nation is vehemently used with the language. So, and region was also used. Some good work have been written on that. So the origin of Dravidian idea. Now we come to the last part of this talk. That Thomas R. Trutman, in his seminal work, Language and Nation, the Dravidian Proof in Colonial Madras, has actually elevated the position of F.W. Ellis over Robert Caldwell in the construction of a Dravidian idea. Trotman wrote, Caldwell's magisterial comparative study of the Dravidian family became a classic. It is great work of scholarship and a landmark in the field, but Caldwell was not excessively generous in giving credit to his predecessor, and Ellis in particular get much less than his due. With Trotman's work, actually, Ellis came to the fore of the identification of the Dravidian idea. And the work of Robert Caldwell, which is more important work, which is associated with many dimensions actually, lost some ground, some scholarly ground. So it must be noted that Caldwell in the preface of first edition recognized Ellis' contribution, however, argued that his comprehension were brief and not of the grammatical forms, but only of the sum of the vocabs of three Dravidian dialects. There is a truth in the argument, as the full-fledged comparative grammar was first written by Caldwell. It must be recognized that F.W. Ellis was the first scholar in Madras Presidency who conceived the Dravidian idea. This was called Dravidian proof by Trotman. The Dravidian proof was first published in 1816 in the note to the introduction written by Ellis for the A.D. Campbell book, A Grammar of Telugu Language. However, we shall find that in the introduction, Campbell also noticed. Campbell was a junior administrator under F.W. Ellis, so he cannot write this quote which I am going to read if Ellis was the sole person behind the conception of Dravidian idea. So what Campbell wrote in the introduction, in common with every other tongue now spoken in India, modern Telugu abound with Sanskrit word. Perhaps it has a greater proportion of them than any of the other southern dialects. Nevertheless, there is a reason to believe that origin of two languages, Telugu and Sanskrit, is altogether distinct. So Campbell also written the things that which makes that Telugu is different from Sanskrit. So Ellis was not the sole person behind the Dravidian idea, behind even the Dravidian proof. So Trotman, however, agreed that although Ellis is the primary figure in the story of the Dravidian concept, in that he authored the published proof, the first published proof, it will become clear that it was the work of many hands. He has given a list of many people who were involved, especially Telugu Brahmins, who were involved in or participated in this work of Dravidian grammar, Telugu grammar. So they have played very important role. So the origins of Dravidian idea, there is another debate whether it comes from the Tamil or Telugu. K. Venkateshwarlu recently argues that idea of a separate Dravidian family emerged from the study of Telugu language and its grammar in his latest work, Colonialism, Orientalism and the Dravidian Language. He wrote that Telugu was the site of genesis of Dravidian prose. Actually, Venkateshwarlu's work, Venkateshwarlu was influenced from the Trotman's work. So he looked how this Dravidian idea emerged with the study of Telugu grammar, with the writing of Telugu grammar. So on the basis of that, he actually argued that the idea emerged from Telugu language. But this is actually not a truth, because we cannot say that Ellis was, however, he has published first time it was published in Telugu grammar. The idea first time published in Telugu grammar, Campbell's Telugu grammar. But Ellis was actually interested in the study of Tamil. Since the times of Pesci, a Tamil grammar of 18th century, who has argued that Tamil languages, he has written two grammars of Tamil language. One was Beshi, has written two grammars of Tamil language, one for the low Tamil, one for the high Tamil, the textual Tamil. So with that, the idea that real Tamil language is available in the language of masses, in the language of common people, it was a prominent idea. And this idea actually not only influenced Ellis, as well as it influenced Caldwell. So this idea was very prominent idea. So Tamil played a very important role. If we see the list of reading of Ellis and what Ellis wanted to do in Trotman's book also, then we can conclude that Ellis was interested in Tamil more than Telugu. So my point is that Tamil was the site, perhaps site. However, the published proof came from the Telugu first, but Tamil was actually the site where the idea was conceived and where the idea in its full-fledged form with all with 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 all things, with all its association published. So it was Caldwell and his Tamil language studies which are culminated in the comparative grammar of Dravidian, and this was the work which has produced the Dravidian idea with all its rigor and dimensions. So these are the some points. Thank you very much.